We've all seen the sketch, seen the face, seen the atrocities that led to 3 deaths and dozens of other injuries. But for 17 and a half years, people only knew a pseudonym, and no one ever thought the actual Unabomber would turn up in a tiny Montana mountain town. So when news broke on April 3rd, 1996, that the FBI had arrested a man named Ted Kaczynski just south of Lincoln, the world's gaze turned to the Treasure State.
There was a TV on in the newsroom, CBS News breaking into programming with a special report.
Dan Rather reporting from CBS News World headquarters in New York. Good afternoon. There has been a major break in the case of the so-called Unabomber.
The Unabomber suspect has been arrested in Lincoln, Montana, and they put his name up there, and my jaw just went.
I ran home for lunch in between class and turned on the TV. Peter Jennings broke in that they had found the Unabomber in Montana. I was like, what? And so then I immediately called into the station and, what's going on? What are we doing? And then I don't even think I ate lunch. I just packed up and ran to work after that.
Jay Cohn and James Rafferty had no idea when they woke up that day that they'd end up playing critical roles in the biggest news story Montana had ever seen. Cohn was the news director at KXLF in Butte and remembers 2 phone calls he didn't give a second thought about at the time.
The Freeman standoff was going on, and KXLF here in Butte had the uplink for CBS. So the network had called and said, we want to make sure there's an engineer there, the uplink is operating, we want to reserve it for tomorrow. And that was the only thing I could think why CBS would be interested that day.
Rafferty was a 23-year-old weekend photographer at KPAX in Missoula. After getting to the station once he saw the report, he talked his way into the car headed for Lincoln, and will never forget the 36 hours that came next.
My daughter went on a school trip and they visited the museum, and I'm sitting at work and all of a sudden I get a text from her, and all it is her saying, "Is this you?" And I'm like, well, yes, Hannah, it is me, but why are you sending me frame grabs from 1996? Well, then right at the same time I get a text from her teacher with a picture of her pointing to it, and her teacher's like, "Did you know that your picture's up in this museum?" And I'm like, I had no idea.
Shannon Everts was in a KRTV rundown meeting when she heard the news. The Great Falls anchor's biggest role in the story wouldn't come for another 20 months.
The truck is coming down 10th Avenue South with the Unabomber cabin on the back with this unbelievable sunrise. And I get this shot and I'm just so excited. And then Dan Rather that night, he opened his whole newscast with the footage of the truck going down 10th Avenue South with the Unabomber cabin on the back.
It was a collaborative effort that showed MTN's real muscle, a statewide network of stations, each playing a part in one of the biggest stories of the century. And there was even a connection MTN didn't learn about until years later to the story's true protagonist, who put an end to nearly 2 decades of violence. We'll tell you about it tomorrow night. Casey Conlon for MTN News.